Hey there, everybody. It's Dave here. Welcome back to Two Old Bloggers, your weekly unfiltered Vikings truth. Darren's finally crawled back from vacation. Now, he's messing with his computer to get the settings right so we can hear him. He's already been on a few times already, and he still hasn't got it working yet properly, but he's working on it, so I thought I'd start without him. Now, hopefully he's well rested. So we're diving straight into the 2026 draft class and whether any of these 9 rookies will actually see the field this year. Who's going to start on week 1 is the question. I don't know. I have some suspicions, but we will see. Or, as Darren puts it, are we just going to need a little Guns N' Roses patience? Great question. We're also ripping into the GM search. Yes, it's ongoing. Rob Brzezinski threw his hat into the ring, and the Wilfs are hunting for a, quote, decisive leader. And why the national grades on this draft are colder than a January tailgate. Well, it's because they are. Plus, that surprise Jauan Jennings visit and why we didn't draft a single wide receiver. So strap in, SKOL Nation. That one's going to sting a little bit. All next on Two Old Bloggers. Rock. Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikingsland with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. Hey there, everybody. There he is, Darren. Are you hungover? Are you well rested? You're not suntanned, not going to the upper northwest. How are things?
Yeah, no, everything's good. Made it back safe and sound after about 8 days in the, like you said, the Northwest, Vancouver Island.
And you're still not on your mic, Mike.
Well, have to. I'm not sure why that is. There's something going on, something weird going on.
All right.
But back here, ready to talk Vikings stuff.
Okay. We can do that. Let's start off with theme 1. But first, I do want to acknowledge all the people in the chat already. I know I haven't posted up anybody's like Forlorn Hopes cheers or Doug's next year's draft is loaded with our wide receivers or Norsefius or anybody else's stuff up here. I see it. We're just trying to work behind the scenes. Delton is here. Drewster, of course, is here. Chevy's here. Bob's here. Hi, Bob. Biggs is here. Just the regular crew looks to be here, and you guys absolutely rock. So let's get on with it. Theme 1. And for theme 1, we call this one Patience.
We do. Apologize for my audio. It all sounds good on my end. I can hear you normal, but it's my mic's not kicking in. So I got my computer mic on, which mine isn't ideal. But draft, of course, Dave. It's all we've been talking about for about a month, it seems. So the Vikings draft class, of course, picked last weekend, and 9-person class. And so, of course, that starts, everybody who follows the team starts getting worked up about those draftees and really wanting to see what becomes of them, right? And I think a lot of times, though, that leads to some, outside expectations of what this draft class will do. I feel like a lot of fans, especially the guys picked early in the rounds, there's an expectation, it seems, that these guys a lot of these guys are going to turn into instant, like all pros, right? Or at least people who are
already fit them for their Hall of Fame jackets. Yes.
Or at least they're expecting them to make a major impact on the Vikings team. And looking at this draft class, Dave, it's a 9-person class, the biggest they've had since 2022. And when I look at the roster, I feel that the fans who are feeling this way need to temper their expectations a fair bit about this class, because I think that patience is going to be required. Like you said, you had sent me a proposed depth chart for the Vikings earlier this week, and it had a little bit of different view on what the impact of those rookies than I have it. And particularly, you look at defensive tackle, where you've got Caleb Banks, the number 1 overall pick at 18, and then Dominique Orange, the 3rd rounder, starting along the defensive line with Jalen Redmond. And that makes sense, a lot of sense, Dave, because before the draft, the people that we were saying that we were talking about who would be proposed starters, what it was looking like, was it going to be Redmond? Yes. And then Levi Drake Rodriguez and Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, who were 2 backups last year. For those 2 guys, Drake Rodriguez and Ingram Dawkins, to be starters, question marks for those guys, because they were backups last year. Ingram Dawkins didn't play a ton as a backup. They were slated to be starters, but
thank you, Ruby.
Certainly not locks in those positions, I think. And so there's an opportunity there for both Banks and Orange, who are highly drafted defensive tackles, at a position where we needed more guys to be the starters along the defensive line with Redmond. And it's not going to be Levi Drake Rodriguez, and it's not going to be Tyron and Ingram Dawkins. But let's, so I want to start there as far as Dominique Orange, 3rd rounder, yes. And he's a run stuffing nose tackle, right? But doesn't have any pass rushing juice at all from everything that I've read on scouting reports. I haven't seen him play. So there's questions there. He looks like he's going to be, at best, in the pros, 2-down lineman at his best, who's in there on running plays. You're not going to have him there on obvious passing situations. He's also coming from Iowa State. Yes, it's a major Division I college program, but still, even at the Division I level, there's always a massive leap for a lot of these guys, especially if you're not picked in the 1st round, from going from Iowa State, like he played, to the NFL level and being an impact player at the NFL level. That's still a big jump for him, and a big jump for any player. So I have questions about how much of an impact Dominique Orange is going to have right away. Listening to some of his comments and what he was saying the Vikings have told him, it sounds like he feels that he is going to make a big impact right off the bat with the Vikings. And I hope that's the case, because he's a very interesting prospect. But I certainly don't think it's with his skill set, which is, again, limited on the pass rushing side of things. And the fact that, again, he's a 3rd rounder, not a top 10, not a top 20 pick. There's questions to me about how much of a bite he's going to have as far as taking defensive snaps in 2026. There's an opportunity there, but I don't think it's anything assured that he is going to be a guy who's getting 25, 30 or more defensive snaps a game. Now, he's got a body type that the only one along the defensive line who plays like him, who has his body type, is Taki Taimani, and he hasn't really played much in 2 years. But I still think that he's got to beat out Levi Drake Rodriguez and Ingram Dawkins, who are not true nose tackles, it's true, but he's got to beat them out. He also, has to beat out Taimani on the depth chart. I think he can do that, but again, it's not assured. So he's got to beat out 3 guys for defensive, significant amount of defensive snaps. He's got to adjust to the NFL level as a 3rd round pick, where a lot of those guys sometimes, don't become significant don't become starters or don't play a significant amount of defensive snaps as a rookie. So there's a lot of things that Dominique Orange has to overcome. I don't think that it's guaranteed at all that he's going to be a starter or play a significant amount of snaps. I do think that he is eventually going to carve out a significant role for the Vikings as a rookie, but it's going to take time. And Brian Flores isn't going to give him anything unless he really wows in training camp. Orange isn't going to be given anything, but I think that he is going to carve out a role because of his skill set and being really good against the run in college, but it's going to take time. And I think the second half of the season is where Orange might take on a bigger role for the Vikings, but not right away is how I look at it. Caleb Banks is a little bit different, Dave, in that number 18 overall pick, our number 1 draft pick, crazy athletic, huge, 6'6", 330 pounds. The Vikings have nobody on the defensive line right now that is built like him and has the athleticism that he has. The only questions about him, of course, is that his broken foot, left foot. And that is going to, and we're hearing that, depending on who you read, he won't be onto the field until June, or maybe it's training camp, but it's going to be late. So as a rookie, you always come in behind the 8 ball, Dave. Caleb Banks is going to be even further behind because he's not going to be on the field until late June or training camp. So he's got a lot of time to make up. That's going to be valuable reps that he's not going to be able to use on the grass, as Kevin O'Connell likes to say, to work on his technique and the different things that the Vikings got to do. So I think early on, I'd be surprised if he's playing 20 snaps a game to start the season, which might be a disappointment to some because, again, he's a number 18th overall pick. You're expecting that guy to really come in and be a difference maker from the get-go. I think it's going to take time for Banks because of the health issue, and that he's going to lose some time, developmental time because of that foot issue and that having to heal before he can get on the field. And he was a guy that didn't even play 1,000 defensive snaps in college. He missed mostly all of 2025. So he's a bit green green as far as a defensive prospect. So I think there's a lot of developmental stuff that he's got to work out. And he's another guy, if we're expecting him to be Chris Jones or Dexter Lawrence or somebody like that, or close to that right away, I don't think that's happening with Caleb Banks. Down the road, sure. But from game 1 in the 2026 season, I don't know about that. And I don't know if he'd be your starter to start the 2026 season. We'll have to see how training camp goes. But again, when a number 18 overall pick, and Brian Flores, the way he's been talking about Caleb Banks this week, he talked about how every defensive player he's had, their development is different. Some develop quickly, some don't, some are somewhere in the middle. He talked about how he doesn't want to force things with young players and give them more than they can handle. He also talked about how he's stressed to Banks about not worrying about when are you going to be a starter, when are you going to get on the field, but to worry about just stacking good day after good day after good day while you're practicing. That doesn't sound to me like the kind of thing that the comments you normally would say about a number 18 overall pick, Dave. A lot of times they're talking about, what kind of role they're going to have on the team and how much they're going to help the team. I think Flores' comments suggest that he's trying to temper expectations for the media and the fans about Caleb Banks, which I'm fine with. So I don't know if Banks is going to have the big impact right away, right from the get-go in 2026 as a rookie that some maybe are hoping or expecting. What about when we move on to, what about second-round pick Jake Golday, the inside linebacker?
Hold on.
Please.
I want to disagree with you on both of those fine gentlemen on the defensive line. First off, I think Dominique Orange, Big Citrus, is going to get starts straight from the get-go. Now, he'll probably just start off as being a 2-down nose tackle, but we need big guys up front.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's demonstrated in college, can he take the leap to the pros? He's obviously smart, I believe, enough to do that. And he's going to be needed because we got rid of Hargrave and we got rid of Allen. And they're going to look, Flores is going to look to replace both those gentlemen. And I don't think anybody, whether it's Levi Drake Rodriguez or Taki Taimani, and Taki's barely seen the field, or whoever is ready to start. Jalen Redmond's obviously going to start. And in that graphic of the starters, that was a typical 3-4 defense. And both Redmond and Banks are shown as the defensive ends in that formation. Not edges, but defensive ends. So they're going to be playing the 4-eye, 5-ish tackles on that, which is cool. I'm cool with that. As far as Banks and his foot, Wolf said he had a Jones fracture. The Jones fracture was 2 years ago, Mr. Wolf. He's had fractures on the 5th metatarsal, which is the Jones fracture, and the 4th metatarsal, which was the last one, caused by he tried to wear probably too small, too tight set of running cleats, track cleats, right before he ran the 40-yard dash, and he felt a pop, cracked it. It wasn't a full break, nothing. He's already had the surgery, the pins, all that stuff done. He's already out of the boot. He's into his normal shoes. He can, now whether you're worried about him missing June's OTAs, right? Or the end of May's OTAs. What are they doing? They're going through walkthroughs, right? You're going to stand here. He's going to hike. You're going to look over here. You're going to walk over this way. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. But nothing's at full speed. You're not going to hit anybody. Now, what he might not get to do is hit the pad, right? Hit the pads on the sideline, which is true. He might not until it's, quote, 100%. But he's hopping around like it's pretty good right now. So I suspect Banks will be ready for the time, at least by the time training camp comes around, to be 100% full go at that time. And that's when they start hitting. And I don't think he's going to lose much just because, hey, he can't go full go in the month of May or June. He's still going to be out there. He's going to probably line up. And like I said, they're going to go through walkthroughs. This is what you do. And literally at walking speed. And they're going to walk through and they're going to do this. And they're going to work on their communication and do that. And I think he's going to be just fine. And I suspect he will be a full-blown starter from the get-go. Unless he needs a breather. I suspect Banks will be a go. And, hey, I could be wrong, but that's what I see of that 18th pick. He is by far the best tackle prospect, defensive tackle prospect in the draft. Green Bay Go-Pack goes on here and he said, well, he took McClellan because he wanted pass rush juice. Banks is a disruptor. He blasts through the line, and he absolutely will terrorize Jordan Love and terrorize Mr. Williams and terrorize Mr. Goff this season. I have no doubt whatsoever in my mind. But we can differ on that. But I understand you and your rookies, you can't give them all pro nods and yellow jackets just yet.
Dave, bullish on the defensive tackle class of the Vikings, which is good. Moving on from them, I want to talk about the second round pick, Jake Golday. Is he an inside linebacker? He's an edge. He's done a bunch of stuff at the college level. Inside linebacker, hard to see where his path to playing time is going to be because we've got two starters, Blake Cashman and Eric Wilson. Cashman does tend to get dinged up, so Golday could be the next man up there if he gets hurt and misses a couple of games. But if they stay relatively healthy, he's not going to see much time there at all. Now, is Brian Flores going to use him as an edge rusher? Because with the Jonathan Grenard trade, now you've just got Andrew Van Ginkel and Dallas Turner as your starting edges, and really nobody of note behind them. Flores did use Eric Wilson a bit as an edge rusher last year, not a ton, but he did use him, and would be, I think, willing to do that again. That could potentially cut into some of Golday's role. The Vikings, I think, also are going to look at bringing in a veteran edge rusher to round out that room. Guys like Leonard Floyd, I know he's getting up there. AJ Espinoza is also available. There's a few others, not standouts, but the Vikings might bring in a veteran to give themselves a bit more comfort on the depth side of things at edge. That could cut into Golday's potential impact as well. So I'm having a hard time figuring out where Golday fits in the whole, as far as playing time and significant amount of playing time. Certainly he's going to play a lot on special teams, but there's some things that are blocking his path, I think, to playing time, particularly at inside linebacker and edge rusher. Well, I know he did some of it in college, but he wasn't strictly playing edge all the time. So he's got some learning to do there at the pro level as well, if he's going to be used a lot as an edge rusher, and particularly if he's going to, I've read some stuff about how their Flores might potentially is going to have him train him to be in the Andrew Van Ginkel role. Well, they tried to do that with Dallas Turner last year. Turner didn't really thrive in that role. He thrived in the Jonathan Grenard role. Maybe Golday's different skill set, different type of player he is. But for Golday to train to be Andrew Van Ginkel, there's only one Andrew Van Ginkel, I think, in the whole NFL. And it's going to, I think, Golday's going to have a tough path to get a guy to be a guy who's going to play 300, 400 defensive snaps for the Vikings and be a significant player on the defense. I think I like the pick. I like the potential that he has. I just don't think we're going to see a tremendous amount of impact from him in 2026. But if we do, that's great. Moving on to the third round, where we had three guys.
Whoa.
Oh, here we go again. Dave jumping in there. Good.
No, I agree with you. I don't think we're going to see much of Golday other than special teams. And to me, he's a curious individual. And he almost seems perfect to take over the Van Ginkel role. But is he? Is he a little bit smaller? Is he, and I mean, he's 240, but he plays well in pass coverage, but his pass rush is his lowest graded function on it. He got moved to middle linebacker. He's played everywhere from edge to middle linebacker and the corner role, which is a very strange makeup of a player. He's one of those tweeners. I comp him more to Josh Metellus, and the fact that I think Flores will probably try to use him in some sort of almost fantasy role like Metellus is used. Up, back, forward, inside, outside, whatever. But do I see a lot of him playing? Do I see him starting? No, probably not. Not until somebody gets hurt, whether it be Wilson or Cashman. But yes, I agree with you. Lots of special teams, but probably not a whole lot of starts.
When we move to the third round, I feel it's the beat goes on here with these guys. You got the offensive tackle, like Blake Treenan. Again, no path for him to playing in 2026. Certainly not a tackle, even if O'Neal or Darren
healthy. Mm-hmm.
Well, even if one of those didn't get healthy, I mean, you got the Buffalo Bills guy that you brought, Van der Merk's your swing tackle. But is Treenan a guard? Is he a tackle? There's been talk about moving him inside, but then again, you've got Will Fries there. You've got Donovan Jackson there. Our depth isn't great along the offensive line, but I think a third round rookie for him coming in, I don't see any path for him playing any kind of snaps other than garbage time, or if we get really hit with injuries, then he has to play out of necessity, which isn't the greatest thing. He's a developmental guy.
Yep, I agree.
Northwestern kid. When you look at as well. Beyond him, Bredesen. Sorry, I'm getting a bit confused here because I'm forgetting the.
You got the Bredesen.
Well, yeah. But Bredesen, we know he's in for the CJ Ham role. He's here to replace CJ Ham. But Ham only played 180 some offensive snaps last year, 28%, and that was the most his usage had been in the KOC era. The Vikings brought in Frank Smith who was the offensive coordinator at Miami, a very innovative guy with the run game. And there's been talk about how Bredesen's going to be used, or Frank Smith is going to use Bredesen like he used Alec Ingold in Miami. Ingold, in his time in Miami, averaged about 36 to 37% of the offensive snaps there, with Smith running the show. But is Bredesen going to play that large amount of a role with the Vikings as a rookie? Ingold already had 3 seasons under his belt when he came to Miami. He was a veteran, knew what he was doing. Again, Bredesen, top-rated blocker coming out of college. We know he's really good at that. That he's going to be a fullback, maybe a bit of an H-back. But again, how much usage is he going to get in that role? And Kevin O'Connell did use CJ Ham more last year than he ever had. Partly that was because he realized that his quarterback situation, they had to focus more on the run and they needed better blocking there. But I'm still skeptical that he's going to be as committed to the run as as he was at the latter half of last season. Or does it just become, with Kyler Murray likely as your starter and the Vikings' ability to pass the ball is going to be much, much more improved if that's the case? I don't think Kevin O'Connell is going to lean on the running game as much as some people might think he is. If he's got Kyler Murray throwing the ball,
is professing to. Yes.
Yeah.
Are we saying KOC is throwing out wish casts and knows better himself?
So, if again, Bredesen, will he play 150 offensive snaps total during the season being a rookie? Going to play a ton on special teams, of course. But again, I think his impact is going to be minimal with the offense as a rookie, even though we're hearing lots of good stuff about him. We know he's a great blocker. But how much that's going to be used in the KLC offense, I'm pretty skeptical, especially with a rookie.
I'm hoping he turns into Jimmy Kleinsasser too, 2.0.
Well, that would be nice. That would be very nice. Moving on to the 5th rounders. We'll get to that a bit, but Charles Demmings, the cornerback, great character guy, super intelligent kid. Looks like he's a great locker room guy, and he was very productive as a college player. But it was at Stephen F. Austin, which is, to go from there to the NFL, a big step in competition for Demmings, who is super athletic as well, has the size you want from a cornerback, but he's got a steep learning curve at the NFL level coming up for him. And as a 5th rounder, not a whole lot of 5th rounders, including 5th round cornerbacks, play a significant amount as rookies. I don't think when you look at Brian Flores and how he has used cornerbacks in his 3 seasons as a defensive coordinator, he often hasn't had much use for a 3rd cornerback, let alone a 4th. And they've got Byron Murphy, you've got Isaiah Rodgers, and they just signed James Pierre, a pretty solid, low-cost free agent signing from the Steelers, who I think will play that 3rd cornerback role. Again, I just don't see Demmings getting on the field as a rookie other than garbage time, blowouts, that sort of thing. And so he's another guy that's not going to have a big impact in 2025. How about Damon Claiborne, the running back from Wake Forest? Super fast, big time home run hitting ability, can take it to the house, electric with the ball in his hands. He's got the skill set that the Vikings don't currently have with any other running back they have on the roster. But again, he's stuck behind Aaron Jones. He's stuck behind Jordan Mason. Particularly with Aaron Jones, health is always an issue. But if those 2 guys are healthy, where is Claiborne's role? Does he get 5 offensive snaps a game, a couple of touches, 5 to 10 might be the most as a rookie? Just not seeing where he can carve out playing time in 2026 again, if Jones and Mason are pretty healthy and are able to play, they're going to get 99% of the offensive, the touches as running backs in there. So I don't really see a path for Claiborne either, except on special teams and an occasional touch on offense as a change of pace guy as a rookie. So significant impact for Claiborne in 2026, not seeing it. Down the road, different story. And then the 7th rounder, Gavin Gerhardt, the center from Cincinnati, their last pick in the draft. Will he make the team? Hard to say. If he does, he's behind Blake Brandel and Michael Jurgens on the depth chart. And again, no path for him to see any playing time in 2026, I think. The one guy out of all this that we haven't mentioned yet that I think does have a path to playing a significant amount of snaps is Jakobe Thomas, the safety who we picked with our last pick in the 3rd round. Interesting guy because he didn't have much. The year before he was at Tennessee, he was a backup there. He played at Middle Tennessee State before that and was productive there, but it's Middle Tennessee State. But last year with Miami, he had 3.5 sacks, 11 passes defense, 2 forced fumbles, and he also had 5 interceptions. That's some great production at Miami, which went to the college, national college championship game, and Thomas was a key player on that defense. So what he did last year, some people feel that he was a little bit, he was overdrafted late in the 3rd round, but looking at the safety position, Dave, Harrison Smith, you just had up there. We're not sure if he's retired or not, but the chances seem pretty good that he is. And if he is retired, then you've got Josh Metellus, who is your one starting safety, but who is the guy opposite of him? Theo Jackson didn't really capitalize on his opportunity last year when the Vikings gave him the chance to be the starter. Jay Ward ended up playing more as that second starting safety last year, but in his 4th year, he hasn't played a whole lot on defense. Most was last year, encouraging. I thought he played well when he did, but again, he's a bit of a question mark whether he can really be a starting safety at the NFL level. And even if Thomas does not get to be one of start opposite of Josh Metellus, with the amount of 3 safeties that Brian Flores has used in the past few years, I think Thomas is a guy who could see a lot of time playing 300 defensive snaps or a bit more, even if he isn't a starter. And that might be more than just about almost every rookie in this class right now. So my view on this class, a little bit different than yours. Like you're bullish on Banks playing a lot and Orange playing a lot, and I'll probably get proven wrong on that. But I think overall, to me, again, this is the patience thing. And Matt Collar mentioned this in one of his columns earlier this week, that he said when you look at the 9-guy draft class that the Vikings had, he felt that 2026, again, you're not going to see a Randy Moss emerge out of this class right now, who just takes the league by storm and is one of the best of the best. He said they drafted, he thinks, looking at 2027 and beyond. And I agree with that. And that's why, Guns N' Roses had that song out in the late 80s, Patience. And I think that's something that Vikings fans have to take into account and have this year in 2026 when they're looking at this draft class that the Vikings have. That are we going to have the class like we did in 2015, where you had Diggs came in there and was a starter, Danielle Hunter was playing a significant amount as a rotational guy in defensive end, Eric Kendricks was a starter at middle linebacker from day one. I don't think so, but a year from now, 2 years from now, could be totally different look from a lot of these guys. They could be playing major roles for the Vikings that they weren't playing as rookies.
Mm-hmm. And John told us not to forget our UDFA kicker might have a chance to win the job, the punter, and get a start, which is true. Thorson.
Thorson, yes. He could give Johnny Hecker a run for his money.
And he won't have more snaps than everybody else, but he could be considered a starter. But yes, I think Breedson's already got, quote, a starting gig as the fullback. Now, question is, how often do we play the fullback? Is it, like last year, 28% of the snap or whatever it is, or you go Smith and go up in the 30s? I don't know. But I love the fact that we got him. Like you said, I think Jakobe Thomas has a chance, and I love my defensive tackles. So, everybody else, welcome to special teams.
And
learn and get better.
And when you looked at the roster before the draft, and we talked about this before, Dave, starting wise, the Vikings were set at just about every position other than defensive tackle. That was a spot where certainly we saw rookies having a clear path to playing time if they could earn it. But wide receiver, not so much. Offensive tackle, no. Offensive guard, no. Center, no. Edge rusher, no. Until we traded Grenard, and now we need a number 3 edge rusher there. Unless you're planning on playing Dallas Turner and Andrew Van Ginkel like 95% of the defensive snaps, and actually that's how they played Van Ginkel and Grenard.
Everybody stays healthy. Yeah.
So
and Biggs said the only thing that's going to keep Thorson back is his holding. Hopefully he's got that mastered, because that's what Hecker's going to do. And Hecker's got it mastered after 20 years in the NFL or whatever, however long he's been in there.
Indeed. And the Vikings aren't going to want to mess up. They're going to want a good holder for Will Reichard because Will Reichard had such an outstanding year last year, and you don't want to mess anything up in that operation that will force him to, get him off his game.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing I do like about Breedson, he's now J.J. McCarthy's emotional support buddy on the team. So that'll work. All right. That's the end of theme 1. On to theme 2. And in theme 2. Wrong one.
Not Guns N' Roses, but.
No. If David, find the right button. There we go.
We're going to talk about the Vikings general manager search, which kicked off officially this week. Wednesday, I think Wednesday was the Mark and Ziggy Wilf released a statement that the general manager search, the search to find a replacement to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, who they fired in late January, has begun. And it was a pretty short statement, but the Wilfs said in this search, they mentioned 3 things that they're going to focus on, that they're looking for in that general manager. They're looking somebody for a clear vision on team building. They're looking for somebody with strong communication skills and somebody who has an ability to build alignment across the organization. And when you read those, Dave, and after the stories we read about Kwesi Adofo-Mensah getting fired, the 3 things that the Wilfs mentioned seemed to me to be the things that I read and you read that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah didn't do well when he was general manager. And those 3 things played a role in him getting canned by the Wilfs, along with the Sam Darnold thing and and also the drafting stuff. So they're looking for qualities that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah did not show were strengths of his as he was general manager. So that was interesting. They've hired a headhunting firm out of Turnkey 2RG that they've hired, New Jersey based. So the Wilfs probably know that organization pretty well because they're from Jersey. And so that headhunting organization is going to develop a list of candidates that the Vikings will consider for the general manager's job. And the Wilfs also said in the statement that they aren't going to release any names of the candidates that they are interested in or that they're interviewing for the job, which isn't surprising. But we also know that even though they're not going to release names are going to get leaked out at some point in time, that the Vikings are considering them or have interviewed them and that sort of thing. And this week we found the first name got leaked, which was Rob Brzezinski, who has been the interim general manager since Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was fired. And this got out that Brzezinski is interested in the full-time general manager's job, which was a question mark because he hadn't tipped his hand on that while he was interim GM. He didn't say one way or another whether he was interested or not interested. If these reports from Kevin Seifert, and I think Ian Rappaport was the other guy who Tom Pelissero also reported on as well, if those are true, and I think they probably are, those guys are pretty plugged in, then Brzezinski is throwing his name in the hat. And based on, we also got some anecdotes about how whoever leaked this, I think it was from the Brzezinski camp, or they support the Brzezinski candidacy because they're talking about Brzezinski being highly respected in the Minnesota organization and by the people that work there, and that there's a lot of internal support for him taking over the general manager job. Myself, Dave, and you can chime in as well, and I'm sure you will, I have mixed emotions about Brzezinski being, throwing his hat into the ring, if that's true. I mean, there's no doubt on the one side, he's been excellent at his job in the almost 30 years he's been with the Vikings as the salary cap guru, the financial guy, the contracts guy. He's considered one of the best in the business at that. On the other hand, as he just finished being interim general manager and overseeing a draft that's not getting a lot of rave reviews from various NFL draft experts, if you want to call them that. And during his time at the Vikings, where he's had varying roles and been heavily involved, from what we've been told, in decision-making for the organization, he's been part of the organization that has not made a Super Bowl in the whole time that he has been with the Vikings. And they haven't even gotten to the NFC Championship all that much. So, I don't question Rob Brzezinski. He's a smart guy. He's excellent at what he does. But if he's going to be the general manager, my wonder is what is he going to do different as it becomes general manager? Or should I say, is he going to do things better than what had been done before by Rick Spielman and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah? If you hired him, it seemed like it's a bit of a status quo hire for the Vikings to do that. So that's why I mixed emotions, because I think the Vikings need to get this right. Maybe they need something different. Of course, they did try the different route with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. It didn't work out so well, but there's been some other names that have started circulating.
Yeah, but for Brez, the whole one of the issues with the Vikings, and I agree with Tony the Machine on this, is they run the team by committee. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah was not allowed to do what Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah wanted. Well, that was obvious by not hiring Harbaugh. It's run by higher-ups. And whether you want to call it the Wilfs being in New Jersey all the time, and except for coming for games and stuff, it's an odd situation on how the Wilfs have everything set up. And I'm not sure if whoever is chosen is going to be better or worse than the other people if the same people above them that are making these decisions are still making bad decisions. I do believe Brez, with his almost 30 years with the Vikings, has the respect, and he's generally been in that top decision-making group. So if he's made the GM, I think he'll have even more sway of it that way, which I think is a good thing. And you're great to question. Well, if he moves to GM, who takes over his job? He's got his underling, and don't remember her name off the top of my head.
Emily Battis, I think is her name.
Yeah, and she can step up and get promoted, and then promote somebody else, else beneath her. But I think Brez would be fine for now. I don't see any change. Now, we do need to go over some of the people you suggested, some that are starting to leak. There's about 3 lists out there, and you've highlighted on 2 of the people. Oh, actually 3. One's a hell no, but.
Well, there is, there's some names that, like a few of the NFL media or people that cover the Vikings have started throwing out names of candidates that the Vikings might consider. And Albert Breer had a list of 6 names. He came out with this week. One of them included, and it's been mentioned in the comments, included Ryan Grigson, who is the assistant general manager of the Vikings right now. And as you sent to me yesterday, Vikings fans are now freaking out that Grigson is even being considered for the general manager job. I don't think that, like, if they didn't, I was saying before, if they didn't hire him to be interim GM, why would they give him give him the full-time job if they didn't trust him to be the interim GM, and they had Brzezinski do it? But anyway, that logically wouldn't make sense to me, but who knows? So Grigson was one of them mentioned. Alec Lewis from The Athletic had a list of 14 names that he came up with earlier in the week. Some of them are people that had ties to the Vikings, who worked with the Vikings in the past, including Terrence Gray, who's the assistant general manager for the Buffalo Bills right now. There's Reed Burkhardt, who's the assistant general manager for the Broncos. Both of those guys were scouts with the Vikings under Rick Spielman once upon a time. Grigson's another guy who's got Vikings ties. But then there's a list of other guys that don't have Vikings ties, but some of them overlapped with Brian Flores and Kevin O'Connell in their previous stops with other NFL teams. So, but one thing that was pretty common with all the names that Breer has come up with and that Lewis came up with that I saw is that they're all like grinding scouts guys. They have scouting backgrounds. They started out as scouts with the Vikings or with other NFL teams, worked their way up into progressively higher responsibility in the front office, and almost all of them are now assistant general managers or that sort of level. These are all the names. So again, these are guys with football heavy backgrounds. Some of
You're
them
looking for a super scout, in other words.
Yeah, and some of these guys played in the NFL level or at the college level at least, but they're football guys. Kwesi Adolfo was not a football guy. He never played football, and he was the supposed innovative hire the Wilfs made, somebody different from Rick Spielman. That didn't work out so well for the Vikings. So we thought that if the Wilfs would be looking for more of a traditional scouting type background for their next general manager. And if any of these names are guys that the Vikings are going to consider, and I think some of them probably are, there's only so many assistant general managers in the NFL, right? And guys like Terrence Gray would be well known by the Wilfs and the Vikings, their scouting staff who've been there since the Rick Spielman days. So it makes a lot of sense that the Vikings are going to look in that direction. Rob Brzezinski wouldn't be the traditional hire, but again, he's been with the Vikings for almost 30 years, and he's been at every draft meeting and all of these different meetings and personnel. I think he's learned a lot about all of that over 30 years. You couldn't help but do it, even if he wasn't a scout himself. But we'll have to keep our eyes out and see if any of these names emerge and get leaked as guys who are the Wilfs have interviewed. Hopefully within a month or so from now, we'll actually find out who the new general manager is so they can start building the plan and the vision for the team in the future. Maybe it's Rob Brzezinski. Maybe it'll be somebody else. But a huge.
Do they want a decision maker up there, or do they want a super scout? Obviously, you'd want one that could do both, but are they going to allow that? And that's my question, my hesitation on all of this. As of right now, I'd throw my hat behind Brzezinski, but it's only because he's done it, and I liked what he did this 2 weeks ago, for the draft. He's rebuilding without telling everybody he's rebuilding.
I think that the interesting point you're talking about your thoughts on the decision-making structure with the Vikings front office and how a general manager hasn't been able to really be the decision maker in a lot of cases because the Wilfs have this edict from on top high that we always have to be competitive. So that kind of takes away the option of the tank, not the tank mode, but the rebuild mode, where you strip things down to the studs and accumulate draft capital and high draft picks and over a couple of years, and you're always picking in the top 10, and you start hitting on you get a better chance at drafting a bunch of studs and getting to the Super Bowl that way. That does take off. If the Wilfs never want to do that, that does take one option, one strategy away from whoever the general manager is. And some general manager candidates probably might not want to have their hands tied that way.
Exactly. Kwesi did it because he was new. And, but he obviously got frustrated. Anyways, well, that ends theme 2. What comes after theme 2?
Theme 3.
Okay. This week in Vikingsland. Come on, open up. There we go.
This week in short.
There we go. Sorry. It's. All right.
Drew's asking who we thought made the draft decisions, Brzezinski or somebody else.
I'm betting somebody else. Well, I'm betting the coaches mainly.
And there was a story came out in The Athletic this week of anonymous quotes from different NFL executives about the Vikings draft, and one of them mentioned that he thought that the Brian Flores must have had a significant influence on this draft because of the picks that they made. They felt this NFL executive who wasn't named felt that it was very coach-centric, was I think the quote that he used.
And so, it very well could be. And Brez was told to be, he was brought in. He wasn't there to make, I'm going to decide on drafting this dude. He was there to settle disputes and bring everybody to a consensus. And whatever the consensus was, he was what he was pushing. So,
yeah. And if you get to a certain pick and
Jimbo, I didn't find one. I made them.
If everybody's in agreement with where a guy should be picked at a certain spot based on your board, which is decided by consensus, I would imagine, right?
You would think so.
Then there shouldn't be that many ties to break in a lot of cases. Anyhow, let's get to this week in Vikingsland. A bit light this week in Vikings news, I guess, but I was surprised in the draft that the Vikings didn't draft a wide receiver. I thought they'd draft a couple. I said that 3 weeks ago, I think, and they didn't. And certainly there was a need there. You look at after Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, where's the depth? Not really much. Is Ty Felton ready to be the number 3 wide receiver? Big question mark. I like his talent. I like his speed. He only had 3 catches last year as a rookie, barely played. Do you really trust him as your number 3 guy on a team that I think is expecting to contend, especially if you bring in somebody like Kyler Murray to be your quarterback? That's a big question mark there for your number 3 wide receiver. So with the Vikings wide receiver depth being what it is, I was pretty pleased that they brought in Jauan Jennings, former 49er. I think he's going to be he's definitely a former 49er. He's going to sign somewhere. It's not going to be there. But they brought him in for a 2-day visit to Minnesota because, again, I think that looking at the Vikings depth chart, I'd really like to see them add a veteran who's been productive at the NFL level. The thing was, and when you look at Jennings, when we did the wide receiver position back in early February, Jennings was a guy that I said, if he hits the market, I'd really like to see the Vikings pursue him. I was quite shocked that he didn't get signed in free agency during March because I think he's a really good player. In the past 2 seasons, as the 49ers number 3 wide receiver option, sometimes their number 4 wide receiver option. Injuries last year made him the number 1 option at times, but he had 130 catches the last 2 years, over 1,600 receiving yards, 15 touchdown catches in the last 2 years. He's big, 6'3", about 215 pounds he's listed at, and he plays mean and nasty, and he likes to block, and he's good at it. I think that he'd be a huge positive addition to the Vikings wide receiver room. He'd give them insurance against injury if Addison or Justin Jefferson, God forbid, were to miss some games, a significant amount of games, because he's shown in San Francisco that he can be a legit number 2 guy, I think, if you need him to be that. And also, again, he gives you insurance in case Ty Felton just doesn't get it. And he's just not ready in year 2 to take on a bigger role with the team than he had last year. Of course, he left Minnesota without a deal, and disappointing, but not all is lost. He hasn't signed with anybody yet, as we were going with the show. I think he's picking out his spot. I do wonder about the fit and money-wise, though, Dave. If you look at the Vikings, take the Las Vegas Raiders, who have a bit more salary cap to throw, a bit more salary cap room to throw around for a guy like Jennings. They also, I think, have more opportunity. You look at their wide receiver room. Their top wide receiver might be Jalen Naylor, who has never had as good a year as Jennings had the past 2. So the Patriots might be another situation where their wide receiver room and their salary cap situation would allow them that they might be an appealing place to go for a guy like Jennings. Whereas if he goes to Minnesota, he's going to be playing third fiddle behind Addison and Justin Jefferson. And does that make a lot of sense for him? The Vikings also might not be able to offer him quite as much guaranteed money as maybe some other teams or the targets. So I don't know if Minnesota is the best place for Jennings, but on the other hand, the Vikings just signed Kyler Murray, a couple of months ago, and he's used to playing with some good quarterbacks in San Francisco. Maybe the idea of catching passes from a guy like Kyler Murray would be really appealing to Jauan Jennings, even with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison already being there. So it's up in the air. There's still a chance that he will sign with us. The Vikings, I think, sure need Jauan Jennings, a player like Jauan Jennings, because he's the best. I think he's the best wide receiver still available amongst the free agent options. Sure, there's Tyreek Hill. Who knows what shape his knee's in. I think Deebo Samuel is kind of washed. His best days are behind him. Ditto for DeAndre Hopkins, who didn't do much with Baltimore last year, and I think he's pretty much in the Adam Thielen territory at this point in his career. I'm not going to make much of an impact for you. So if the Vikings could get Jauan Jennings, that would be a huge get for them. We just haven't got him yet, but I hope we do.
Well, we'll see. He's supposedly asking for a 3-year deal. Probably I've heard on 13 to 20 million range, which is what he was asking for to start off with, which everybody said no. The Vikings, I heard, were offering a 1-year deal, prove it type. He said, well, I'll keep looking. So
yeah, I can see why he would do that.
Mm-hmm. So it is what it is. His agent's Drew Rosenhaus, which the Vikings have a good relationship with. So
yes. Yeah.
All right, so now to the next thing. Draft grades, post-draft grades.
Yeah, I know everybody hates these. I do too. But the grades are coming out this week, right? Looking at every team's grades, and the various people, the Mel Kipers of the world, are giving you A, B, C's, D's, F's, whatever. I haven't seen them all, far from it, but what I have seen, they've not been all that complimentary of the Vikings draft. Kiper gave him a C. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank here, but from The Athletic, Dane Brugler from The Athletic ranked their draft 29th out of 32 in 2026. PFF shit on their draft. I think they had them ranked 32 out of 32. The best I've seen so far.
It was like 28, but okay. It was down there.
It was not great. The best I've seen so far was NFL.com. Somebody there gave them a B-. Overall, a lot of C's I'm seeing. Again, does this mean anything? Really, no, because none of these draft experts have put in the time, watched the amount of film, did the intel on the players that the Vikings drafted or didn't draft compared to the Vikings player personnel and college scouting staff. Not even close. So they knew these players the best. They had their board the way they did. They picked the guys that they did based on the information they had gathered, and they've gathered a lot of information on these players over the past year or two, probably. So it's tough to question them at times. On the other hand, the Vikings haven't really generated a whole lot of benefit of the doubt since 2021 with the way they have drafted, and it's been mostly the same scouting staff and player personnel staff that have been overseeing that. So, that's where you go with these draft grades. Although one thing that I noticed from the draft grades that I have seen is that a lot of the high draft grades were from really bad teams who had like multiple first round picks and were picking high in the first round, second round, third round, like the Cowboys, like the Browns.
Getting higher value picks just because you suck. Yes.
Yeah, like the Jets, like that. So they got the high grades because they had 3 first round picks, and the Vikings did not have that. Some of the teams that got low grades along with the Vikings were like the Seahawks, the Rams, super successful teams last year who also didn't have a whole lot of draft picks this draft in particular. And I think the Vikings also are getting dinged, particularly with the Caleb Banks pick, because a lot of people, while nobody questioned the guy's talent, his athletic makeup, how big he is, how strong he is, how fast he is, but the foot thing scared everybody off. The foot injuries, people felt 18 was just too early and he's too much of an injury risk. So that's not a great pick at 18. On the other hand, how many difference makers are there in this draft, particularly along the defensive line? Not that many.
He may be the only one. Yeah.
Might be the Vikings made a risky pick. It could be a risk that pays off, but the Vikings are getting dinged because of that. And the experts didn't really care that they picked Jake Golday in the second round, or Charles Demings in the 5th, or Damon Claiborne in the 6th, which were pretty good values based on where they got them and where they were projected to go. So there's a bit of a built-in bias there to those draft picks. If you're a crappy team who's getting picking in the top 5 in each round, you're always going to have a better shot at the better
Jets,
players,
the Browns, the Raiders. Yeah. Yes.
So, but that doesn't seem to help those teams very much over the years. So, but still, the benefit of the doubt of the Vikings in drafting, they don't have one over the past 4 or 5 drafts. So again, these draft grades don't mean anything. But on the other hand, for a worrywart like myself, this is in the back of my mind about how poor grades they're getting for this draft from the quote-unquote experts. So we'll have to see how it all plays out.
Well, I had to do some research on it. So I asked the computer, who's the best at it in the last 20 to 25 years? And the computer came back, well,
I don't know.
they don't sort of grade it immediately afterwards, right? And then they have tried. There have been times to do a return on investment, ROI. Who's had the best ROIs by taking AV scores from Pro Football Focus, over, 4 years from now, who got the most AV off of that? And AV is how well you did, how much you produced, and it's stuck into a number and it's given to you, and it's all this. And believe it or not, the best AV post-draft AV score that turned out to be 4 years after it was drafted was the 2015 Vikings. They had 103%. How they can have over 100, but they had 103%. And they are the best in NFL history because we had Diggs and everybody you said. But when it came to the people that graded, Mel Kiper, believe it or not, is the one that generates the closest to being a predictor of how the draft will go. But it is just a prediction.
Yes.
It's like flipping tarot cards and going, hey, this says you're going to be a millionaire. All right, great. When? Well, after you move to, Tehran and exchange $500 for, a billion real or something like that, you're going to be a billionaire. All right. So I think it's going to be, it all depends on how the players developed. Do they stay healthy? Developed and coached, whether it be through putting on weight in the weight room, the right strength and all that, the correct coaching. How are they employed during that coaching? And then by employed, how are they used? all that plays into a factor as to how well you did in the draft. And you won't know that right after you drafted. You've got to wait a few years before you can figure that out.
100%.
And there's one other thing they didn't like about the draft.
Yeah, they didn't like us trading Jonathan Grenard. The Vikings didn't like trading him either, which maybe tells you something about that trade. History might not look kindly on it, but we did it. It does save us, put us in a better salary cap situation next year and even this year. So there's that, but we lost our best pass rusher in doing so. So,
and Bob asks, he wonders how we survived World War XI. He'd never know. I won't either. So it is what it is. With that, any last words there, buddy?
Oh, no, not at all. I guess we'll have to see what happens this week, right? We're into a bit of a dead zone football-wise with the draft coming on, free agency coming gone, training camp not here for another couple of months. But we'll always talk about stuff. We'll probably even talk about the draft again next week. Maybe we'll.
Well, as we wait for the schedule release. And we're going to work on your microphone, get it working. So.
Yes.
With that, what do we say?
We say SKOL Vikings, and thanks everybody for watching and commenting.
Yes.
A ton of comments.
Yeah, everybody out in the chat, you guys have been great. You absolutely rock. And SKOL Vikings.
SKOL Vikings.
Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. And rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcasts as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!